Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. This is the Blue White Breakdown presented by Penn Live. Johnny McGonigal, joined by Max Ralph. Max, how you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling great. I'm doing double duty here today. If you guys
Yeah.
watch Thursday's podcast with Bob Flounders, you will recognize that I'm wearing the same outfit because we recorded these back to back, but this one's coming out later. So, but I'm feeling good. It's been a good bye week. Like I said yesterday, Johnny, I hope you enjoyed yours as well. I know you got to see some pretty cool stuff. So, but yeah, all good. Looking forward to a trip to Madison.
Looking forward to a trip to Madison for Penn State, number 3 Penn State, against Wisconsin in what some people are labeling a trap game. I would just say it's a difficult game.
Yeah.
It's going to be a challenge for Penn State ahead of the Ohio State game next weekend, which, as long as Penn State takes care of its business this weekend and Ohio State does the same, it's going to be a top 5 matchup. And I was about to say under the lights of Beaver Stadium, but I really just wish it was under the lights of Beaver Stadium. It will not be. It's big
Yeah.
noon kickoff. Thank you, Fox. We actually have a question about that. And this is another mailbag podcast that we're doing here, Max.
Yes, sir.
Fielding questions from our subtext subscribers. It's been really a lot of fun over the last few weeks doing these. A myriad of questions, whether that's Penn State specific with the offense, defense, whatever else, or bigger picture, looking at the Big Ten, looking at the CFP. If you're a subtext subscriber, send us your questions when we prompt you every week. And if we don't get to your question on this podcast, like I said, I think last week or the week prior, we'll respond to you on the subtext or use your question for a later podcast. I know we got a lot of entrants and submissions this week, and so Max, I think just getting right to it would be the best thing to do here. So the first thing, and we kind of touched on this last week, but it's worth bringing up again, the slow starts. Coming out of the bye week, something that Penn State wanted to correct and get better at. The question comes from Asia. Everyone keeps saying we need to fix the slow starts, but I wonder if these aren't a part of the game plan, a way Coach Kotelnicki feels out the defense, puts in place so he can assess how they're going to defend. It also seems like slow starts have been a part of Penn State since long before James Franklin. So what do you think about that, Max, that Coach K is poking and prodding the defense to see what might work and what might not?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a valid point in there. You do things early in the game in order to be able to exploit them later on. I mean, how many college football teams do we see? I mean, throughout a whole game, but they get set in a formation, fake a snap, and then they look to the sideline and they change things. Like that's like your classic example of the things that they do at any point in the game are in order to set things up later on. With that said, no. Any Kotelnicki wants to score on every drive. Like that's, he might be saving some stuff. Like there's definitely truth in that. Like there's a reason why we didn't see that Tyler Warren play with him snapping the ball until the second half last week, because they wanted to see how USC's defense was going to react to stuff they did. But he's not saving enough things to where they're expecting to fall behind early or not score, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Like they are scripting those first drives in order to score, and they haven't really done that yet. So that's still an area of concern. I do think when you look, especially at that USC game, like they're totally capable of doing it. They just stalled on the 5-yard line and had the pretty questionable penalty bring them back. So yeah, Johnny, I don't know if you have anything to add, but like, yes, they're trying to figure out the defense, but no, it's not part of the game plan to start slow.
No, Max, I think you explained that pretty well. I agree with you. It's not like Kotelnicki and the offensive staffers and Drew Aller, who we know has been super involved, more involved than he was last year in terms of play selection and game script and everything else, him being comfortable with all the plays. It's not like they're sitting in the room being like, all right, this play is going to tell us a lot. It's not going to work. but it's going to tell us a lot about the defense. So yeah, they're trying to score on every drive, but there is something to be said. Like I get the thinking behind the question, and when it comes from trying to expose the defense later in the game and setting up plays. I agree with you. Sticking with Coach K, we get a question from Todd. Is Kotelnicki's offense too quote unquote gimmicky to beat top defenses? Max, I say no. I wouldn't say it's necessarily gimmicky. I mean, yeah, there are some trick plays in there when you have Tyler Warren snap the ball and then go catch it in the end zone 33 yards down the field. There are some trick plays up his sleeve. But I think in essence, his offense is more so just pre-snap motion, movement, shifts to help just ID man coverage, zone coverage, and put defenses on their heels a little bit. But what they get into for the most part as an offense, I think is pretty vanilla. I don't mean vanilla in that like it's boring. So maybe vanilla is not the right word, but it's pretty normal. I'll say, for a spread offense. It's just the pre-snap stuff is different. So I say no, but what do you say?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think I would argue that the gimmicky nature of his offense actually gives them a better shot against some of these top defenses, because top defenses are so good at what they do because they're able to recognize what an offense is trying to do in the pre-snap, and because they're either just more talented or just have better play recognition. Whereas when you have all the smoke and mirrors of what Kotelnicki does, and I will say, like, to add on to that, when you have those smoke and mirrors, you have to have the personnel to be able to like handle it, both from an actual like physical ability standpoint and from a mental standpoint. And Penn State does have those things. Like Drew Aller is really handling this offense this year. I mentioned it in Andy Kotelnicki's press conference on the bye week last week. Against USC, they had Prabula in the shotgun one play, Aller split out wide, and even from like the wide receiver spot where it's really hard to control the entire field, Aller is out there like moving Luke Reynolds across the formation. He's yelling at Prabula saying, "Look, the play clock's going down. You have to snap the ball." Like, he's in total control. That's what Andy Kotelnicki said, which is why this stuff works. And then of course you have a guy like Tyler Warren, who James Franklin went on a pretty long, not an aside. I was going to call it a rant, but it was like a very positive thing. Rant's not the right word, but he gave a very long answer about the fact that because Tyler Warren used to be a quarterback in high school, like, he's done a read option before. Like, he's taken a snap under center. He's taken a snap from the shotgun. Like, he knows how to do these things. And he's a really smart guy. So I think that I actually would say it's the opposite. I think that these smoke and mirrors, because Penn State is so capable of executing them well, helps against a top defense. Because like you said, it is at the end of the day the same thing that everybody else is running. They're running inside-outside zone runs. They're running read options. Like, it's pretty basic. It just looks funky.
And one more thing to add, when you compare Andy Kotelnicki's offense to what Penn State had last year, what happened against those top teams when, Yursic's offense, they were pretty rigid, pretty basic, pretty bland. I use the word, really over almost the last year, uninspired.
Yeah,
I thought was an apt way of describing the way his offense looked. We saw them, struggle. It was like pulling teeth to move the ball against Ohio State and against Michigan, their two biggest tests last year, their two biggest games last year. And so, we'll see what happens next week. Obviously, we'll see what happens this weekend at Wisconsin. But if you're talking about the top teams and the biggest tests and the best defenses that Penn State will face, like that, like all of it is encompassed next week when Ohio State comes to town. And I don't think, like they did last year when Penn State got the ball at the 50 or whatever it was at Ohio State, and they went backwards and had to punt. Like, I don't think you're going to have, like, I don't think the offense isn't going to look like that and struggle like that. And I think those motions, like everything else that goes into Kotelnicki's offense, plays a huge, huge part in that. Max, sticking with, just being tested. We talked about Wisconsin being a challenge this weekend, Ohio State being the challenge of the season next week. We got a question from Jeff. He says, "Hey Johnny," because I put the prompt out there, into the subtext to ask for questions, but I'm sure it's addressed to you as well, Max. With the 2 road wins at West Virginia and USC, how quote unquote battle tested do you believe Penn State is at this point in the season, especially compared to other teams they will be facing in upcoming games? What's your take on that?
I'd say they're in pretty good shape, honestly. I mean, I think we talked about it pretty extensively last week, Johnny. I think we got a question about that USC win and how it's kind of a season changer for Penn State moving down the line. I believe it. Like I don't think a team of the past 5 years at Penn State. I said this already. I don't think a team before this one comes back and wins that game. Like I think that there is some serious resilience in this squad, and I have to give a lot of credit to them as well because like through the offseason, through the spring, fall camp, I was a little worried about the leadership on this team. I think a lot of us were, and like it might sound like a weird thing to say because like leadership is a very abstract idea. Like you can say leadership, what does it really mean? But like the guys have stepped up. I mean, you look at Drew Aller, he's number 1 on the list to come back and lead that drive against USC. Like the kid's very mature now. Like you can hardly call him a kid anymore. Like he speaks with such confidence that he didn't have last year.
He still has the baby face.
He does.
He still has the baby face.
He does. But like he's just different, And I think you look on the defensive side, like there's so many guys who aren't even captains that do such a good job of having this team on track all the time. Like the big one for me, Devon J. Thomas, like he's always the one who we hear after a game, if there's a big moment, if they're trailing it at halftime, whatever, he is always the one who's giving the locker room speech. Like he's not a captain, which is shocking to me, but I'm not getting into their process, but just to wrap it up, like I'm very impressed with the way that this team has matured and handled this season so far. Because you look at the weather delay at West Virginia, the halftime deficit against Bowling Green, and then the fourth quarter comeback against USC. Absolutely battle tested. I'm not worried about them at all in a road environment at Camp Randall. Not worried about them at home against Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of them being battle tested. I think you checked everything there. One thing to just add on with the question, compared to the other teams they will be facing in upcoming games, I will say at this point in the year, when most teams have played, I think every team has played at least 6 games, if not 7. And this is going to be coming out on Friday. So there will be some teams that play Thursday night that'll be playing their 8th game. Yeah. I think almost everyone, you could say something similar about everyone being battle tested. Like, I think you look at Ohio State, for example. They go on the road and they lose by 1 point in a back and forth game with 6 lead changes at Oregon. You talk about intimidating environments, going and playing there. Like, even though they lost, I still came away after watching that game still very impressed with Ohio State. And and I think that I'm sure those players, whether they're old like Will Howard or young like Jeremiah Smith, like that experience, I'm sure, taught them a lot. And you could say even in a loss that they were battle tested. You can go down the list. The team so far, especially in Big Ten play, especially in the SEC, in those 2 conferences, when you go on the road and win or lose, you're getting tested. And that can teach you a lot of things. I mean, we go back to, 2016 when Penn State won the Big Ten title game and they, upset Ohio State. Like, I think you talk to the players on that team and they would argue that they didn't get to that point of winning the conference without losing to Pitt on the road. And I think they learned a lot in that experience. So I think at this point in the season, most teams are battle tested, but I would agree with you that Penn State definitely is, given everything that they've already gone through. I forgot for a second, Max, about the weather delay at West Virginia. I don't know how I could have forgotten about that, considering
It's
how much I was
unforgettable, Johnny. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of a way to start off the season.
First
And then
game,
yeah,
covering them for Penn Live for me, Johnny.
it was I'm sure you loved that experience. Your first game as a Penn Live reporter covering the weather delay. It was incredible.
I said it already. I kind of liked the weather delay. I thought it was funny, and the drive home was hellish, but like,
yeah,
I thought it was funny. There was food in the press box. We weren't in the rain. I thought it was kind of a unique experience.
Yeah, I still think about that travel back though, because I hopped in the car with Bob and Joe and we drove to Harrisburg, and then the next morning I had to wake up and drive back to Philly. Like, that was not fun.
Johnny,
Not fun at
you know
all.
what? You know what I didn't put together yet? Imagine if we had that weather delay at USC. Do you think they would have brought the beers out sooner?
I would have requested it. I would have requested it, and I think they would have. I really think they would have. I bet you, dude.
Yeah.
So for those who might have missed our podcast, I think it was last week when we were talking about it. You know, our experience at the Coliseum for Penn State's game at USC. When we come back up from the interviews, like post game interviews with Franklin and the players and everything, we go in the press box and there's two massive like ice chests, like bigger like Yeti coolers, full of beer. And
they were huge.
They were massive. So they had a lot. They were telling us to take some to go. I don't think that might not be legal, but it was great. It was great. So yes,
they weren't open.
Yeah, that's true. Just shove them in your backpack. All right.
So that was crazy. Their hospitality was great. Haven't seen anything like it.
Two thumbs up.
Out of money, I know. 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
All right, so we've sufficiently gone off the rails a little bit here. Let's get back.
A little bit. My bad.
Let's get back with a question from Paul. I'd like to understand how the Big Ten games are selected for each time slot. Does Fox have first pick? I'm tired of all the home noon starts that Penn State gets stuck with, especially a game like Ohio State. Fox does have first pick. And from my understanding, there's a draft that goes on, almost like a fantasy draft in the preseason. It's a similar deal with the NFL, if I'm not mistaken, like in terms of the, like the Thursday night games and Monday Night Football and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's a little bit different there, but between Fox, CBS, and NBC, I don't know exactly how the draft works. I don't know if you can trade picks. I don't know if I don't know if it's a snake draft where you get the wraparound. But I Fox gets first preference. They pay more and have the rights to more Big Ten games than CBS and NBC do. Anything to add to that, Max?
Nope, you covered it. I'm not behind the scenes on the drafts like you are, but I do know that there is a draft. That's why there were like preseason reports that X game was the top preference of X network. That's pretty much it. And I do think until Penn State gets out of this contract, you're going to be stuck with Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt on Big Noon for Penn State's biggest game of the year. Yeah.
Look, I think we've talked about this from a coverage standpoint.
Great.
I love noon games.
Mm-hmm.
You get done early.
Yep.
We get to go home and enjoy the rest of the college football slate. I still have my AP poll I have to do and the story that goes along with that. So, there's the work never ends on Saturday, but as opposed to me doing it after an 8 o'clock game, don't get me wrong. Like as a fan of the sport, like I think Penn State, Ohio State should be under the lights every year because that it brings out a different side of Beaver Stadium. Not saying that they don't get up or get juiced for a noon game against Ohio State, because it's Ohio State. That place is always going to be crazy.
Right.
But yeah, it should be under the lights. But as it is currently constructed with Fox, as well as CBS, NBC, unless both teams are really bad, like that's going to be a big noon kickoff game for the foreseeable future, Max. We got one next week. Very much looking forward to it. Speaking of big games, last year, Penn State, Michigan was a big noon kickoff game, right? Yeah, it was big noon.
Yep.
Yeah. Michigan not on the schedule this year, but we actually have a couple of questions about Michigan. I think some Schadenfreude, some happy Penn State fans looking at how poorly Michigan is playing right now. They're sitting here at 4-3. And we got a question from Jamie. How can a team that has dominated the Big Ten over the last 3 years suddenly not have a serviceable quarterback on its roster? Hard to fathom that they are now they're now starting an Indiana cast-off. And then we've got a question, or more of a statement from Jack. Wish we were playing Michigan this year after watching their Illinois game. They don't look very good. No, they lost to Illinois over this past weekend. Really good win for the Illini. Yeah. I mean, you talk about a program win for Bielema and those guys. Like Illinois sitting here at 6-1. They have to go out and play Oregon this weekend, and I think they're like 3 touchdown underdogs. But look, even if they lose that game, there's a very real opportunity for Illinois to get to 10-2 or 9-3 this year, which would be a great result. Michigan ain't getting to 10-2. They can't. They're 4-3. I don't think they're getting to 9-3 either. This is the makings of a 6-6 team looking at the schedule, because they still play Oregon and Ohio State. Max, what are your just general thoughts on Michigan this year and kind of their immediate dip post Jim Harbaugh national title?
Yeah, I just think I kind of fall back on the fact that I'm just really not that surprised. If you just really look at it holistically, lost the head coach, lost the quarterback, lost the best running back, lost the best wide receiver, lost one of your best defensive backs to the transfer portal, lost, I think, 2 linebackers to the draft, lost a D lineman to the draft. They're just not the same team. People also hate on JJ McCarthy. While I'm not sure what his NFL career is going to look like I'm not getting paid to decide that. He was a dang good college quarterback, and that's the bottom line. He did exactly what Michigan asked him to do and never made the mistakes that he couldn't make. He was really good in that system, and that's part of why everything worked last year. The other part is that they were stealing a hell of a lot of signs, and they're not doing that anymore. And I mean, again, all teams steal signs.
No, they might be doing it and just be really missing Hunter Stallions' talent.
That's possible. But I was gonna say, all teams steal signs in some capacity. Let's not act like that's not part of the game. I mean, now that there's the in-helmet communication, it's certainly less of a thing. Yeah. But in the past, everybody's been stealing signs. They just did it at a really extreme level. I mean, it's not surprising. They're not the same team. They're missing a lot of the things that made them good last year, and they don't have the personnel this year to do what made them successful last year.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, going back to the preseason, excuse me, going back to the preseason, and it might have been week 1. But we discussed this. It was a question that we had about which team in the top 10 in the preseason do we think could ultimately fall out of the top 10, because there's always at least one team ranked in the preseason top 10 in the AP poll that falls out of the rankings completely. And I think we both picked Michigan. I think you also might have mentioned Florida State, which if you did, I think you did.
Yeah.
Kudos on that. Totally fell apart. Portal did not work out for Norvell and the Seminoles this year. But yeah, I think one thing to add on the quarterback specific issue with Michigan and to Jamie's question about not having a serviceable quarterback on the roster, I think Harbaugh's departure, the timing of it, hurt them when it comes to the portal, not being able to get in a Will Howard type or I don't think Kyle McCord would go from Ohio State to Michigan, but one of the more attractive quarterbacks in the portal. I mean, they're using right now Jack Tuttle, who is in his 8th year,
Sounds
something,
right.
yeah, something crazy like that. So, and Alex Orji has not been good. Davis Warren was not good. Guys they had on the roster. So yeah, with the way that Harbaugh left and the timing of it, not able to get a quarterback in, or really, it wasn't really an attractive position for a quarterback, frankly, when you look at what they did and how they did things last year. And the pieces that they lost. I will say on defense, like they still have a lot of dudes out there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of game changers, like Josiah Stewart, the transfer edge rusher from Coastal. He's been incredible, arguably the best defensive player in the Big Ten this year. Will Johnson's still doing things at corner. Mason Graham.
As long as he's on the field, he is.
As long as he's on the field, yeah. Mason Graham at D tackle has been as a projected first-round pick for good reason. So they still have some guys on defense, but they just have Mullings is just trying to carry the offense, the running back, but like they really have no dudes on the offensive side of the ball. Colson Loveland's good. But when you don't have a quarterback to throw it to you, they're not going to be able to do much.
I would just add, like, also Jayshon Barham, very good linebacker over there.
Yes.
A guy who I thought Penn State should have targeted in the portal and probably did because they wanted him out of high school, but didn't win out on him. But anyway, I'm curious to see how things go under Sharon Moore. I don't think. Like, obviously, he doesn't have the pedigree that Jim Harbaugh has, so things could change. But as far as, like, NIL support goes, university support, Michigan is going to have the talent again next year. Yeah. Like, they're going to be fine in the transfer portal. Their recruiting class is very strong. They're talent-wise going to be fine in the future. This is a weird year. Championship hangover for sure. Coaching stuff in the future could change things, but from a pure on paper talent perspective, they're going to be right back in the future.
They're loaded. I mean, as a program, when it comes to NIL, donor support. I mean, what Dave Portnoy from Barstool promised that he would create like millions to get a quarterback for next season, and I don't doubt it.
No, I 100% believe it.
And he's not the only one by any means. I mean, they've got some serious NIL backing, and of course, it's this year their down year. Penn State fans can enjoy it from afar, but Michigan not on the schedule this year. They are the next 2 years. But Ohio State isn't on the schedule the next 2 years for Penn State. So at least you have that. Max, that's all the questions we got. Any closing comments, or should we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we hit it. I love doing these podcasts. Honestly, this is a lot of fun for me. I appreciate hearing from the subtext people, like having chats with y'all on the subtext. And I also love. I've said it in the past ones, but I love talking about stuff that's not Penn State specific all the time because we do a lot of that. So getting the chance to open it up is fun. I don't know, Johnny. Do you want to throw your Wisconsin prediction in here at the end?
Ooh, yeah, because you guys did yours on your podcast with
correct, yeah, with
Bob. I think let me double check what my exact score prediction was. I have Penn State winning, and I have Penn State covering. My prediction was Penn State. I believe it's 27-10.
Okay.
I think this game kind of plays out similarly to the Illinois game, in that it's not a huge, massive difference on the scoreboard. Penn State beat Illinois 21-7, but in terms of game control and talent differential, it was obvious that Penn State was the better team on the day. I think you're going to get a little bit of that. But my bold prediction is that Penn State will not only have one interception, but they will have two interceptions in this game. I think they're going to do enough to limit Tawi Walker, the stud running back for Wisconsin, and force Braden Locke into uncomfortable situations. And he has 5 interceptions in his 4 starts this season. I think he throws a couple more to Jalen Reed and AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber and those guys in the secondary.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The secondary and Braden Locke's interception woes is something I brought up with Bob. I do believe Penn State is going to be opportunistic, is the word that I used on defense. My number, I said 34-20. That's a lot of points. I'm not going to go back on it because I put it in print, so I can't go back on it. But
it's on the record.
I'll just say, like, podcast wise, like in hindsight, I think that's a lot of points. Being out at practice Wednesday night, I said it with Bob again. Energy was a little bit down, and I do think there's some voodoo magic in Camp Randall Stadium, like that 2021 game. Things were just mucked up and ugly. We could see some more of that. I do think Penn State's a significantly better team, though. I think it's fair to say it'll play out like Illinois because they're kind of similar in what they want to do. Wisconsin wants to run the ball, only pass when it has to. So, yeah, I think 17 is a pretty wide margin for you, Johnny, but I think Penn State wins comfortably. I went with 34-20. Might be a lot of points.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. We'll see. We'll be there. Me, you, Bob, and of course, our phenomenal photographer, photojournalist, Joe Hermit.
Yep.
We will be flying into, by the time you listen to this, we might already be in Chicago or Madison, flying into O'Hare Friday afternoon, and we'll be in Madison Friday night. You guys, if anyone's going out to the game, or maybe even any Penn State fans living in Wisconsin or in the greater North might be out and about. You might see us. Who knows? But looking forward to the game on Saturday night, Max. Looking forward to seeing you out there, and looking forward to our next mailbag podcast because, like you said, these have been a lot of fun. Subtext subscribers keep sending the questions in. Listeners keep listening. Watchers on YouTube keep watching. The Blue White Breakdown presented by Penn Live. This has been Johnny McGonigal, Max Ralph signing off.